Welcome to the studio tonight. I think we're going to paint another mermaid here. I've got it pre-drawn out. You can see it's a little bit of a stylized mermaid. She's got some really fancy hair and a fancy tail over here. It's going to be fun to do. We're going to use a couple of colors of green. Oh, right here I've got my flesh color paint right there just to make it a little easier for me. You can get it too by Flesh Color Paint, where we buy all your paints. Just makes it a little more uniform, her skin, and then we don't have to worry about getting it too red or too yellow. We've got the basic tone set apart for us there. Okay, I'm starting with her face. I'm going to work down her body. Basically, here we are into the neck. And you can see the flesh tone goes on pretty nicely. You can mix this with a little brown. It would darken it down real nicely, or just lighten it up a little bit with a little water and lighter, for whatever flesh tone you want. I'm just gonna quickly block in some color. I am using a little smaller brush than I would normally use. I want this painting to stay just a little bit drier. I don't want to have to pull out the hand dryer to do this. Alright, so I think for her tail here, I'm going to use a little bit colored of Windsor green and phthalo green, I'm sorry, and Viridian, and just kind of let that mix into that flesh tone there. I want to make sure I get a little bit of that flesh tone into her side fins there, lateral fins. And then while this is wet, I'm just going to let that green and the flesh tone kind of run together just a little bit. There we go. This is going to be a nice color for her tail, all the way down to a point there. Good, good. Her fin kind of splits in half and curls around on itself. We're going to paint that a slightly different color. All right, I'm just going to begin. This is a little more of the Viridian. It's got a little bit of a blue tint to it. It's a little darker. And I'm just going to start to block in some shadows. We're going to come in and define those much more in a little bit. But I just want a little bit of shadow to start with in there. All right. And I'm going to come back and put a little bit of shadow in on her body. I'm not going to do it with blue like I typically would, or a gray color. I'm just going to use more of her flesh tone, make it a more rich, more fuller color, and that's going to serve as my shadow. There we go, around the side of her face, that's in shadow, underneath her eyebrows, on the side of her nose, underneath the ridge of her hair. There we go, just anywhere we think there's going to be a shadow, we'll drop that in now. We'll drop in a hint of it now. Back up there. Just a little bit under her arm. And there we go. Okay, so now I'm mixing a little bit of my cerulean blue and a little bit of the Viridian, and I'm going to use that as the base for her tail fin here. I want to leave it much more to the blue tone. I want it to be distinctly separate from her tail section. And I'm just going to mix this up and put it in here for right now, just adding some color. I'm going to come back and put in some shadow lines in just a second. And again, I'm using a slightly smaller brush. This is a number 2 Winsor Newton University brush. I actually very much like this brush. But it's going to keep it a little bit drier for me than perhaps normally I would paint. And so it's going to dry a little quicker. I can come right back in and put in the shadows. Now I am putting in a little bit of ultramarine blue here. This is deep shadow, deep in that curl of her tail. And I want it to be a little bit different. I want it to stand apart a little bit, so I'm changing that color of blue just ever so slightly. All right, I'm going to come back and just drop in some blue, that same color of blue basically, but I'm just going to intensify it and make some lines where the veining of her tail fin would be. And just think about it and just follow along. I've already drawn in the lines. The lines I've drawn on this picture are fairly dark, much darker than I've done in pictures past. So it's a little bit easier to see exactly what I'm doing here. Just anywhere you think there's going to be a shadow on that tail, we're just going to put in a little bit of that color. Right down along there. Good, and on the inside, we can't forget about the inside of the tail. Now you could say that the whole inside of the tail is in shadow, but I don't want to do that. I want that fin to be mostly transparent, a little translucent, so I want some of the light to come through. That's why I'm not painting it totally dark. And on this side of her tail, this fin on this side also gets a little color over here. A little hole right there where it wraps in on itself. I'm going to put a little dark color in there. And there we go. I'm going to move on for just a moment. I'm going to mix up some color for her hair. My paints were a little dry. I needed to moisten them a little bit. Here we go. I'm going to use a couple of different colors. I'm going to use my brown, and I'm going to use a yellow. It's going to be a little bit darker of a yellow. Whoops. I guess first of all, I'm going to put her fin in the side here. There we go. And on that side, the same color that matches the tail fin back there. Just adding some lines. Part of the fin that's in shadow there. I just want to indicate that with a little dark color. Doesn't have to be perfect along the lines that we've made, but we need to pick one side of that line to paint with and stick with it. And just wherever, when you look at that, you think there's a shadow going to be, we're just going to drop a little bit of color in there. Whoops. There we go. No harm, no foul. And just draw those all on. These come down to the bottom. And we just want to make them follow the contour of that curl so that when a viewer looks at this, they know immediately that that tail, that fin is wrapped around itself. There we go. Just down at the bottom, it gets a little darker. Just like that. And on the inside, there's some darkness. There we go. Okay. So now, I'll do the same thing on her fin. That one's a little bit wet. I'm going to leave that for just a second. Here's my two colors of yellow and azo yellow. I'm just going to drop in, and those are going to end up being my highlights. And I think I see a problem that I'm going to get to in just a second. I have inadvertently painted her arm yellow. There we go. We'll just lift that out. I've forgotten that she has two arms on her. I'm going to have to go back in and paint that arm at some point. Okay, haven't gotten all my yellow highlights on. I'm going to just drop in some of my brown paint and I'll let those two colors mix together where they can. And those spots are going to be my highlights where the sun or the light is really hitting that hair. Everything else is going to be a shade of darkness or a dark brown. Here we go. We're just blocking in a little bit of color at this point. I do try very hard to follow the contour of whatever it is I'm painting, just in case my brush strokes can be seen at some point. They get a little bit dry and you can't see them. I want you to be able to see the brush strokes I make along the contour of whatever it is I am painting. Plus it helps me imagine what I'm painting a little bit better. So here we go. We've got our hair painted on one side of her head. We're just going to come and put the paint in on the other side. She's got some nice flowing hair. We're going to come back in a minute and put some low lights in there, darken it up just a bit. All right, right along her neckline. Good, being careful not to go over top of all of that yellow. We want some of that to shine through. If we have to cover it up, if we've got too much, we'll get to it in just a second. But we just want to block in some color. Something like that. And now, let me think. I probably should go back and paint her arm before I forget about it. So mix just a little bit more of that flesh color. And just go. I've got to be a little bit careful. I'm using a smaller brush. The paint is drying much more quickly than it normally would for me. So I can paint this here without too much of a worry of the paint running altogether, but I do have to be a little bit careful about it. And there we go. If I can just darken a little bit of that for a shadow line, that would be great. I think the paint is just ever so slightly too wet. I can't quite get it the way I want, but no worry. We're going to move ahead. Oops, I dipped into the wrong color there for just a second. Okay, we're going to start putting some low lights in her hair. Here they all go. Just so you can see some streaks in there and make it easier for the viewer to see the flowing direction of her hair. There we go. Whatever hair is in the back, I'll just make it a little bit darker. Let the hair that's a little bit lighter stay light and stay away from that yellow. It can be a highlight. There we go. Just show a little curl. Very good. Right down around her neck and her shoulder. It's very dark as it goes behind there. You'd be surprised how easy this is to just, the paint is just not quite dry. So it blends together just nicely, takes off a little bit of edge on it. And we can do with it just about anything we want at this point. There we go. And if you look now, it looks like you can see she's got some color in her hair and some real highs and some real lows in there. All right, I'm going to attempt to do a little bit of her face. I've gone with a smaller brush. This is a 00. It's tight quarters in there. Very small picture. I want to make sure I can get it. I don't want her eyes, the whites of her eyes, to be white. I want them to be just slightly blue. So I put that little blue in there. Now her pupils are going to be the or her irises are going to be the hardest part. I'm mixing a little bit of paint. I want to get a lively gray or a greenish gray, a very greenish gray in there. Here we go. A little red for her lips. And we are getting there. We're nearly done. Just a few touch-ups here and there. I want to come in and try to make her fin or tail here look a little more round, give it a little bit more definition, add a little bit of extra shading to it. There we go, something like that. Good, good, good. Just a little bit here and there, and we are just about done with this one. Tapping on a little bit of texture onto her tail. I'm going to take that just off after it leaves a tiny bit of mark. But that's it. We're all but done with this. Just blending a little bit so we can see. There we go. That flesh right through that fin. They merge together almost like nothing. Adding a little bit more definition to her torso. Darkening a little bit of shadow. And we're there. I'm not wild about the shadow under there. I don't hate it. But it's going to look good when it's done. I'm just going to touch up her eyes for just a second, darken them up, and we're just about done. I hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed painting with you. Subscribe to my channel. We can paint again later. That would be great. You'll get an automatic email about the update. And I hope you enjoyed this. Give a like, and we'll see you in the studio next time. Thank you so much.